Now there's a guy named Patrick Lencioni who wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And in that he talks about 5 different things. One is the absence of trust. That if you can't depend on somebody enough not for there to be repercussions or company politics coming back at you, that you don't trust them to share information or share ideas, that's kind of the basic dysfunction that cripples most teams. And there's fear of conflict. Because if people can't share their thoughts without fear of repercussions coming down, then what you end up having is an artificial harmony. You have people just going along with the flow. Yeah, sure, because I wouldn't tell you what I really think because I'm afraid of what might happen. But yeah, sure, I'm not going to ever bring up a conflicting opinion. Never would I do that. And then you also have a lack of commitment. Well, since I was just giving you lip service, I'm just pretending to buy in just to get along. Yeah, sure, group decision, that's fine, go ahead. Yeah, oh yeah, sure, I'm with you. So then you have a lack of commitment, and that's another dysfunction of a team. And then that leads to an avoidance of accountability. Since I'm really not with you, I'm just with you, then I really don't care whether this thing works or not. So only the boss is really the one who's going around, who's worrying about it, who's being accountable, the team leader maybe, but the rest of us, eh. And then what happens? There's an inattention to results because who really cares? I wasn't really into it. I only got involved in it because that's what we were doing, and it all kind of boils back down to this absence of trust. Now there's a fix for this. There's a fix for that pain. There's a fix for that dysfunction. And that's what we're going to look at right now. I'm going to give you some solid that you can go back to your company and to your team, and you can be the person to help to bring this together so that there will be results and accomplishments that there would not have been had not you gone back and applied these principles and techniques to the people in your management molecule on your team and helping to fix this pain. And it all boils down to the first 2 words that we talked about. And what are those? Active support. So you've got the bosses, you got the peers, you got the direct reports, you got all kinds of pain and people not trusting one another and not sharing other opinions because they're afraid, and so they're not really committed and they're not accountable, and so there's bad results. And how are you going to be the person to fix that? Well, here's a key to unlock each of those different relationships. Your boss, the peers, and the direct reports. You ready? So you're on a team, and there's some people involved, and you're trying to accomplish a goal, and there's some pain involved, and so you're here, and you're going to get this thing figured out. You're going to go back, and you're going to have a winning team, and everything's going to be great. You're going to be promoted, become a rising star in your company, and you're going to make more money and be rich and famous and successful. And don't forget us little people who helped along the way when that happens. But that's what you want. You want results. Now, in those 5 dysfunctions that we talked about, where the bottom one was a lack of trust, the number one thing that all led to was an inattention to results. People who don't trust one another, people who won't share conflicting opinions and don't really buy in and just kind of go along with it, although team members like that. What happens is that it's the results that suffer. It's kind of like a quarterback who it's the 4th quarter of the game and the team is losing by 30 points, but he comes over to the coach and says, boy, I'm having a great game. My stats are up. I've thrown 2 touchdowns. I really feel good about my performance. And the coach says, yeah, but look up at the scoreboard. We're losing by 30 points. And that quarterback was revealing that it was his own self-interest that really was important to him, not the results of the team. And unfortunately, that's often what happens when there's a team and they don't have the active support of one another. The results suffer because people end up looking out for number one. I'm not going to share conflicting opinions. I'm not going to share my ideas and help this team succeed if I could potentially have this come back on me later. What if this project fails and I get blamed for it? So somehow in this team, there needs to be a way to pull people away from that selfishness of what if I'm the one who gets stuck holding the blame for this thing? Of course, they wouldn't mind getting the glory if it all worked out. But how do you do that? And again, it comes down to two words, and they are active support. Exactly. So here's the keys to unlock this team building power that you can take back to your company, and it'll be one for each of the different groups: the boss, the peers, and the direct reports. You ready? Here's the key to help with the boss: is if the boss is on your team or not, or they've assigned this to you, they certainly hopefully know that you have this team going and that you're working on a project with a team. So the key is this. One of them: it's not enough to be right. You must be perceived by the boss as being right. Now, I can't tell you how many times people have just had the conviction in their soul that they were absolutely right, and as they were being let out of the company by security and handing in their keys and closing up their desk, they knew they were right, but yet in the boss's eyes they were completely wrong. And I saw this recently in a manufacturing company. They're a food manufacturer, and there's a gentleman who was a PhD, smart guy, and he'd been fired. And he was in research and development, and I was asked to do an exit interview. So I went and talked with him. He said, I have no idea why I was fired. Things were going great. I had done this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and he listed all these accomplishments. And sure enough, it sounded like a pretty impressive list of things that he had done and that he was working on, and surely any company would be happy to have that kind of a guy on board. So I had to go back to the vice president who had initiated the involuntary termination and ask him, why in the world was this gentleman fired? And I asked it in a very nice, polite, professional way, of course, but why did this guy receive this involuntary termination? He said, well, it's absolutely true. He did this, and this, and this, and this, and this. He's not lying to you. He did it. It's all true. And at some other company, that could have made them millions and millions, but our production facility doesn't have the capacity to do those things. What we asked him for was this, and this, and this, and this, and yet his heart was over here doing this. He just didn't get it. It wasn't what we wanted, so it wasn't worth us paying his salary for him to do things, however wonderful they were, that weren't what we wanted him to do. Because it's not enough to be right. You have to be perceived by who to be right? The boss. Exactly. So how do you do that? How can you be perceived by the boss as being right? And it boils down to this. This is the main key for how to work with your boss. Find out what's important to the boss and make it important to you. And that's worthy of repeating. Find out what's important to the boss and make that important to you. Now, I was in a situation once where I was hired as a branch manager for a finance company. And shortly after I arrived at work, the competitor bought us out. So there was one of their branches here and one of our branches here, and before long, all of our company's branches were dissolved, and many of us were demoted to assistant branch managers. And that's what happened to me, and I was sent far away from home to be an assistant in another branch. So I went to the boss, the vice president of the company, and said, I'd like to be promoted back to a branch manager with our new company, rah-rah, and what would that take to do? What's important here? He said, well, we're always, it was a finance company, so he said, we're always involved with loans and personal loans and things like that, but the company really has an effort toward real estate. Real estate loans are the big thing. They're bigger loans. They're more secured. Of course, that was a different day. And he said, that's what's important. So over the next 3 months, in addition to doing my quote and beyond, 20 or 30 personal loans, I'd also do 6 to 10 real estate loans, because I learned that's what was important to the boss. And lo and behold, when the next branch manager position came open, I was fortunate enough to be asked to do that. And I can really boil that down to one reason why, out of all the people that were available, that they were kind enough to invite me to take that position. And it was all because of this principle. I found out what was important to the boss, and I made that important to me. So let me ask you this question. If you had to write down right now, what's important to the boss? Because remember, out of the three things that the boss does, they can hire and fire, they can set your money. What's the third thing? What is it? They can set your priorities. Right? And so, what's the priority of the boss? What's the big thing? What's the burden? What's the big responsibility that's on your boss's plate that you could help him or her to achieve? If you don't know, if you can't write that down right now, if you don't know out of this list of 3, 5, 10 things that you're working on, where that boss's heart is and the burden they carry, you need to find that out in the best way that you can. Find out what's important to the boss and make that important to you. And you will rise through the company. That's the key to making sure that you have the active support. Have you heard those words before? The active support of your boss. Because when that boss knows that you share the same concerns and the same burden that they do, then you're going to have more of a camaraderie. There'll be a stronger bond between you, and you'll have their active support because you're helping the boss achieve what the boss wants to achieve. So make sure you find out what's important to them, to the boss, and make it important to you.